Welcome back to Stemming the Gap, where we attempt to eliminate the gap between the majority and minority in STEM fields through, you know, productive conversations. Whether it's a solo episode or, in this case, an interview, we have our special guest, Gregory Minott. If you would like to introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Winston. And good afternoon. My name is Gregory Minott, and I am an architect and a business owner of Dream Collaborative. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for all the work that you and Gavin are doing. This innovative uh, podcast. This
Yep.
is really great. It's really needed. You found a gap in, I think, literally in terms of STEM programming, and I'm excited to be here.
So, yeah, it's great to know about you, but tell us about your upbringing and what kind of culture you came from, and what led you into architecture.
I'm originally from Jamaica, and I got into the field primarily through my parents. My dad was a chemical engineer,
Oh,
and Gavin's grandfather, your co-host grandfather, and he inspired me from that point of view in terms of math and science. And then my mom was a real estate broker, and she sold real estate all over the country, back there in Jamaica. And so that's how I grew up with my parents, that as their vocation. And also around the age of, let's just say 10 years old, we're building a new family home. And I was
wow.
able to participate in the building of that home. And that really inspired my interest in architecture. And, with, of course, my parents being involved in real estate and engineering, I sort of put it together,
Uh,
and I was very interested in art, very interested in physics, and then I was interested in business. So I knew that someday I wanted to be in business, and so I over the years I put it together. But that's where it all started, from us building a family home. And another thing that was interesting to me, because I really loved art. That was another
yeah.
thing. I loved art
I was
and
just about to
math.
ask you. Yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
maybe like in his childhood he had some like connection to art that maybe lead him to architecture, you know?
Oh yeah. No, I
Yeah.
loved art and I loved math. And you don't often find those two things together,
Yeah,
and also
I
love
agree.
physics, right? So it
Yeah.
was this interesting combination. And my mom had a friend who was an architect, and I had a conversation with him when I was around 14. I'm only 14, 15 years old, and I thought it was interesting, and that's what I wanted to do. So I went to school for it after I left high school.
But would that technically be your inspiration in a sense, or like did you get like not only from your parents, but did you get it from like another source? Like you said, maybe how your mom's friend was an architect, but there are like any other people that kind of inspired you in that way?
I grew up with around um artists, so it was interesting. My mom's side of the family was artists. My uncle is a fine artist, painter. My aunt is a poet, and that was sort of my mom's creative side of creative in a different way, I should say.
Yeah.
My dad's side was more, engineering, medicine, um, the sciences. That was their track, and so yeah, I got to grow up with that sort of mix of people in my life, aunts and uncles, and I think a lot of that inspired me. But I do think I had a an innate curiosity for the buildings around me, and would wonder about bridges and how did they, stand up to all of that load. How could a heavy truck, pass over something that was just this thick?
Yeah.
How, so I was very curious about those things. And then I would also see a lot of unfinished houses. People that are, growing up in Jamaica, there were people would send back money from maybe if they were living in America or Canada or wherever, and they would send back money to build these houses, and it would take years to build. But during the time that it was being built, you could just walk into the houses because they were unfinished. They didn't have any doors or
Yeah.
windows on them. They were still under construction. So I remember as a kid, I would ride my bike around my neighborhood and just go into these buildings and
Wow.
wonder about what it would look like when it was finished, and wonder about the construction and how did the walls hold up? How do you make a house out of concrete? What do you have to do to make sure that it would stand up and not fall down? And so those are the kind of things that formed my imagination and curiosity for
Yeah.
the built environment from a very early age.
So, like you said, hey, you use your curiosity to, achieve your dream of being an architect. Tell me a
Yes.
little bit more about your company, Dream Collaborative. I'm really interested about how you um turned your business. I remember you mentioned before, like, in the beginning of the interview, we were like, oh, you were interested in business. How did you build up your architecture interest as well as your business interest to make Dream Collaborative?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Um, well, turning your passion into a profession, right? I mean, that's,
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think, a lot of people's dreams, and that was one of my dreams from a very early age. Again, my dad inspired that, to look at whatever the profession that you go into, look at it as a potential business opportunity as well.
Yeah.
And I did when I realized that, because at Dream Collaborative, we do, a lot of, big, complicated projects. That's what we like to do. We do housing, big housing, apartment buildings or office buildings, um, or, parks, neighborhoods. And what I realized is going into the profession is that there were not a lot of people that looked like me that were doing
Yes. Yeah.
projects at that scale. There were not a lot of, not only that were they not doing projects, there were not a lot of business owners either
Yeah.
that were um, doing commercial architecture. I mean, that's in the simplest form. What we do is commercial architecture, working with these very big, complicated sites, and working with the city and engineers, and it's fun, but it's quite complicated. So we were excited to go in that, but there were not a lot of people that looked uh, like us, and so that inspired me to not only create a company that was um, diverse in terms of
Yeah.
who worked there, but also we wanted to work in places and do projects in places all over, whether it was diverse or not. But we especially wanted to work in underrepresented communities that we wanted to produce, have high quality homes and high quality business environments for people to work in. And we were able to create that in these places. And that really excited us that we were able to do this with a diverse team. And part of what inspired the diversity was how I grew up as well. In Jamaica, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people think that it's so regardless of what you could probably think the impression of it is, which is probably predominantly black, it's actually a very diverse community in Jamaica. I mean, I grew up, I like to say that how I grew up, it looked like the UN. I mean, there were people from
Really? Wow.
all over the world, and it was great. I had a really great upbringing from that point of view, and so coming here, it was very different. When I came to the United States for grad school, I found myself, well, I was just Greg in Jamaica and just amongst folks that were looked didn't of a rich diversity. Here, I was a minority, and it
Yeah.
felt very different, and so I had to adjust to that, um, and so all of those influences and seeing the gap, if to use your the name of your podcast, saw the gap in in representation in the field, and that really inspired us to shape the DNA of the company in the way that we have.
That's honestly beautiful how you use like how like the difference between the minority and the majority to like really inspire yourself to create Dream Collaborative. And I really do I admire it really because a lot of people I notice is very scared because they are a minority and they're not willing to take that risk just because they're a different color than someone on maybe their neighbor or something like that. And it really is truly like you can see it like maybe you see all these books about scientists, but you this is real time, this is you're in front of me and everything like that, and it's really astonishing to see that. But I wanted to ask about like were there any times where you did struggle in a sense where maybe it's not just being a minority but also struggle where maybe it was financially with your business or maybe it was like anything of that nature?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there, starting a business isn't easy.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah.
and so regardless of whatever background you're from, it's not easy. And so I was fortunate to be able to have some great mentors. And I think that's one thing I would share um, with folks and young people is that it doesn't necessarily take someone that looks like you to inspire you to pursue
Most
your
definitely,
dreams.
yeah.
I mean,
I
most
do
of
agree with that, yeah.
the people that either inspired me or mentored or were vested in my success um didn't look like me, and that was great. I mean, because I have friends of different backgrounds, mentors of different backgrounds, different races, and I think diverse perspectives and diverse ways of seeing the world is really powerful, and that really helped me in business because I can understand people's perspectives. I can understand their life experiences a little better because I'm open to it, and they sense that openness. And there's one thing about putting your dream out there in the world to say, I mean, certain things you can't broadcast or boast to everybody, but certain
Yeah.
people you can trust and you share your dream with them, they want to help you to make that possible, right? And so
Yeah.
so that's what I experienced along the way. And yeah, I haven't done everything perfectly. I've made mistakes,
Definitely, yeah. Everybody
for
makes
sure.
mistakes.
Oh yeah, but I learned from them, and there's a saying, um, the only failure is giving up.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah.
if you do not give up, you can't fail.
Yeah.
It's just not possible.
That
And
kind of reminds
so
me of
I
that.
think
Oh, sorry to cut you off, but it was that kind of like there was this one quote I saw where it's like, the good thing about hitting rock bottom is that it's only up from there. So it
that's
kind
right.
of plays in, you know what I mean? So I like it kind of relates in a sense. But
Yeah, exactly.
I was wondering like maybe after all this is a podcast to kind of eliminate that gap. Were there any like experiences that you had or disadvantages that you had because you were a minority, or has this and how has this affected like the future of STEM?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that each individual success, and I wouldn't claim to say that I've arrived or anything, still
Yeah,
on my journey as well. But I would like to think that every individual success inspires someone else, And I'm glad to be on this podcast, and I know you guys doing an amazing job inspiring others, and so happy to be a part of it. And I think that's what it's really about is, um, folks really finding their voice and, knowing that someone else, probably has faced their doubts that they could do it as well, or maybe have been told that they can't because they don't have the right background, or they didn't go to the
Exactly. Yeah.
right university or the right school, or don't come from the right family background, or whatever the reason. Um, but sometimes you just got to do this, just shut
Walk
that
them out.
noise
Yep.
out
Yeah.
and just do it anyway. And so that's what I've tried to do throughout my career, and happy to share that story. I don't know if I answered everything you just asked. I think there was another part to that. If you want to remind
No,
me.
I think it was like, were there any experiences that you had as a minority that
Yeah.
kind of like made you like in a way like give you a disadvantage?
Yeah. So I one thing, and I believe on your first podcast,
Oh yeah,
you haven't
the guy,
shared this,
right?
but
Yeah.
there is a perception of what I found going into the profession was there's a perception of what an architect looks like. And I didn't,
Mhm.
I guess for this one individual that I had been working with, this is before the time of podcast and Zoom and
Yeah.
all of that. Not that long ago, but it was like 20 years ago. Um, and working long distance, emailing back and forth plans. I was working for another company at the time in Manhattan, and
Wow.
the client lived in New Jersey, and we were emailing back and forth, and he's telling me what he wants over the phone, and I'm doing it, sending him things via email, and it came the time for him to meet me, right? And so not
Yeah.
to you probably heard this, if for your listeners, I probably heard the rest of the story on the last one, but by the time he met me, he was like, after we looked at the plans, and he was like, "Oh, this is amazing. Thank you so much." And then this parting words were, "Wow, you're amazing to work with. I didn't know you were black." And I was like, "What?"
What?
Yeah, he wasn't saying it I don't think he believed he was being offensive, or he wasn't
Offensive.
trying
Yeah.
to attack me or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think he was just genuine in his his world and his worldview. He had never uh, had a design professional
Yeah.
work with him before. That was a minority, and so I was, so he shared that. But I thought that was an interesting experience right after grad school, and it stuck with me because I realized that it's depending on if you've grown up in a world where it's an echo chamber and everyone looks like you. Um, that could be experienced for anyone that I encounter in my career, and so I just have to be mindful of that. Um, and then the other thing is, I would say, is when it has been an advantage, I've bust open that door. You just have to give me a crack, right? If there's in our business, they have minority business enterprise.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
how would you say? You know, if you're going after like a proposal, they may want, an MBE is what they call it, a minority business enterprise. And I've taken those opportunities. And if it was small, yeah, it was a small opportunity. I just built on that to open up other doors, right? So I wasn't afraid to even take on the small job that could lead to bigger ones. So in some ways, it helped to open the doors for us through those kind of initiatives, like
Yeah.
minority business enterprise priorities. But yeah, I mean, there's places where it's been an advantage. I do think that when you are one of a few, you do stand out. Oh, sorry, how would I say it? When I came to back up a little bit, when I came to Massachusetts, after studying in New Jersey. I worked in a firm. There were 300 architects,
Wow.
and only two were minority, right? So
Wow. That's
it
crazy.
you do stand out, and
Yeah, definitely.
if you're good
Including
at what,
yourself or
yeah, it was me and my business partner actually.
wow, what? 300 people, that's like I
Yeah,
can't even do the math right now, but
yeah, not a high
that's a small
percentage.
percentage. Yeah. I think that's less
Exactly.
than one, right? That might be less than
Yeah,
1%.
exactly. You're less than one. And in the US, that is actually the statistic. Less than
That's
1%
crazy.
of architects in the US are uh, African American or minority.
Wow.
It's a staggering, um, given how many graduates there are every year, but it's a staggering statistic. But that's where we are. So, if you're good at what you do, the benefit is that you get noticed because there's not a lot
Sure.
of you,
There's
right?
not a lot of people there.
Not a lot of people there. But then also the disadvantage is that there's not a lot of people there. So going
Yeah.
back to the
It's a pro
earlier,
there's always pros and cons for sure.
exactly. And so that's actually also a con because, you know, in the story I shared earlier, then you may not look like what an architect supposed
Yeah.
to, you know what I mean? So then you
Yeah, I
may
feel
get
you.
passed over for opportunities at the same time. So that's the
Exactly.
other thing.
I think wow, that's really crazy to hear,
Yeah.
But I think let's transition a little more into maybe your education or even school for that matter. If I think first thing I want to talk about was I talked to Gavin about this and he said there is a like architect engineering kind of pathway at Low High. And do you think how is that affecting like minorities in STEM? Do you think that's helping them or do you think that's putting minorities like in a disadvantage?
It's a great question. I wish I knew more about that
Yeah.
pathway. Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about that,
Yeah.
about how it's set up. But love to learn more. I think exposure doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And yeah, maybe even I can, help
Teach a
in
class
some
one day,
way.
maybe with a
Yeah,
substitute
you
or
never
something.
know. Yeah, I mean, I've been into the classroom I mean, Gavin will tell you but this is much earlier in his brother's pre-K, a
Wow.
kindergarten class where we spoke to them. That's one of the things that we actually do in a company is we go into classrooms, um, to talk about architecture, talk about STEM, engineering, construction, from a very early age. From the age of 5,
Yeah.
we do that. But we also host high school students in the summer. We have hosted interns. Um, we've done different things. So it's always good to have that early exposure,
Yeah,
not
for
necessarily
sure.
knowing the particulars of the program you're talking about, but
Yeah.
maybe you can share
I,
more on it.
yeah. I think outreach is like one of the most important things to like kind of eliminate that gap. Is I think at one point me and Gavin made kind of a proposal at like the end of the podcast that, oh, what we can do to solve this problem. And it's not just our podcast that's gonna, eliminate, one podcast isn't just gonna eliminate the gap, in 1 year, right? And we kind of devised a plan of like how, wow, maybe if this would happen, maybe the gap would be, smaller. So I think a big
Mm-hmm.
part of that would be outreach and maybe like workshops, not just architects, because I know you're doing a lot based on outreach, but maybe something with like science, math, anything of that nature that really puts them out in the map and gets people interested. Because I think that's one of the main reasons like why, minorities aren't necessarily in STEM, you know?
Yeah, I think yes, I agreed. I think a lot has to do with your environment, right? How you
For
grow
sure,
up
yeah.
and what think is available to you as a career.
Yeah.
And so the more that gets out there, I mean, fortunate as I shared in my story, I did have, I mean, I engineer in my home. My dad was an
Yeah,
engineer,
family,
so I
yeah.
had right? And I had aunts and uncles that were in the profession. And one was a chemistry teacher, one was a doctor, and so
Yeah,
it's so you get exposed. So if it's not in the home, it's certainly the school is the next best place for that to show up. Summer camps, um,
yeah,
is a big one of just making things right, and so that's all great, and that the more that can get out there, that these things are available, people take advantage of it. You never know, a lot of
yeah.
the people that we work with, they were inspired by either a family member or they went to a camp.
Yeah.
We host a so we have organizations like NOMA, National Organization of Minority Architects, who that
Oh wow.
hosts summer camps that um, expose young people to architecture, engineering, and that from that in terms of building. It's a really hands-on program. The American Institute of Architects. So I was the president of the Boston Society of Architects. That's the local chapter
Wow.
of that national body for 3 years ago, and we did the same thing. We hosted summer camps. They have like family nights where you play. You do Lego building. You build things with
Yeah.
Legos, and um, they have this. They used to have this thing called construction, where you build things out of just simple household items like
Yeah.
a can of peas, and you put it together
Hmm.
and you build all these amazing things. So
Wow.
it's about people just using the principles of science to put their imagination to work. And
Yeah.
those are the kind of things that just get, and it's fun, right? It's supposed to be
Yeah,
fun.
exactly.
And
I
so
don't think
those are the kind of
people,
things
sorry.
that get people interested.
Yeah. I don't think
Get
people
this.
realize enough how like STEM is in your life, right?
Yeah.
Like you said about those Legos, everybody that I know that I'm friends with loves Legos, and they don't really take the step back to realize this is kind of engineering in a sense, or like maybe architecture because you're building something, from
Oh yeah.
scratch, maybe just from little blocks, and you created like this wonderful masterpiece. And people don't often realize that because, oh, it's just like a toy. But things like that, or like the thing like the canopies, or maybe like the wooden blocks known as like Lincoln logs that are
Yeah.
actually like kind of, you know, helping you think critically to build these things. And I think that's extraordinary. And things like that, like what the programs you're doing and things of that, it will definitely get like more people definitely involved in STEM because they can realize, STEM isn't this just boring topic that they teach in school and isn't this the modern thing that, oh, it's annoying and, it's not as fun. But once they actually like learn what it is and actually do things that they want to do, which is building Legos, building and playing with toys, and they play and they realize, this is actually architecture in a sense, they will actually, I feel like, would be more interested within their field.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, let's move back about your education and how, especially getting your master's. Gavin told me that, it wasn't easy, transitioning from a different country. Tell
Yes.
me a little bit more about that and being an immigrant from a new country. How do you really adjust to that, major cultural adjustment as well as being a minority within the field that you're studying in?
Yes. So yes, it was a major adjustment. So I was 20, let me see, I was 23. I had already gone to school in Jamaica for my undergrad and um in architecture. So I had a bachelor's in arts in architecture and then moved to New Jersey to NGIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. So I got a full scholarship there to
Wow.
study. Yeah, no,
It's
it
impressive.
was great. Yeah, I was happy. That helped with the transition for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh, so I was able to do that, and I did a dual program in with a it was I did some business courses, but also it was a dual program in architecture and then infrastructure planning. So again, more the So the individual building, but also, how does a building fit into a neighborhood, fits into a
Yeah.
city, and the infrastructure, bridges, and all of that. So I had to. That's what I studied. The transition was, I think it wasn't bad. I think it was the coursework was rigorous. It really set me up to have a career here in the U.S. To
Yeah.
understand how um, American cities worked. How uh, people thought about um, how they solved problems and how they did things as teams. So it was good for me to culturally adjust in a school environment where there were other people from other countries as well. So that did help. But I also found that there was a difference with just understanding maybe my perspective as someone who wasn't from this country.
Yeah.
But I think in time I was able to get through that. I mean, the program was 2 years. I ended up working for one of my professors in my
Wow.
first job after I graduated, and did some amazing work with them before I moved to here to Massachusetts. But all in all, it was great. Made a lot of great friends. But it came. I mean, I had to get used to the cold, as you can imagine, coming from
Yeah,
Jamaica. It's
definitely.
not.
Pretty cold here. The
It's
wind
pretty
chill right
cold
here,
here.
what, 13
Yes,
degrees right now?
exactly.
Yeah.
But the only thing I would say is what we talked about earlier was that
Yeah.
adjustment to really being, sort of put in a category as a minority, and so that's one of the things that um, I think helped me because I didn't necessarily come from a country where there was
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe distinct different people. It was kind of a melting pot, and so
Yeah.
I think that helped me to have the confidence when I moved here to just pursue what I needed to pursue at school, pursue what I needed to do in my career, but also be mindful that there aren't a lot of people that look like me. In I
Yeah.
think it was only me and another guy from Jamaica, um, out of probably 30 students. Uh, we're minorities, so there was always that awareness that at some point it would be good to you know have some influence on the next generation to inspire more folks to get into the profession.
Yeah. Did you really like want to expand? Did you want to like expand on like not like being something possibly like, oh, you are a minority, but did you want to be represented as something bigger than a minority, if that
Oh
makes
yeah,
sense? But like, yeah, something that,
yeah.
oh, people are undermining you because you're a minority. Did you want to ever like, oh, I need to be, instead of you looking down upon me like here, I want to be in the level that you look at normal people. You know what I mean? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I think
Yeah.
you articulated that well, Winston. I think I just wanted to
Yeah.
be known as a great architect, right? Like
Yeah. And I think that's hard. I think
somebody
that's hard
that's
for,
just skilled at what they
yeah.
do and gifted, you know.
Yeah.
So
Without any
I
biases or
didn't
anything
want a
like that.
label, right? Didn't want a
Yeah,
label or a
exactly.
bias.
Yeah, that's like one of the leading issues. Yeah, for sure. Like the conflict was like, oh, the label that because he's African American or because he is a person of color, he's not able to achieve this level of work. Like the experience like you said before,
Right,
with your client. Yeah, because he's a person of color, he's not able to produce the work I have with other people. But as soon as he, saw you and he was like, oh wow, this is he no way, you know what I mean? He created that bias in
right.
his head. And I think
Yeah,
is it like did you ever want to
yeah. I mean,
expand?
yeah, people on the do. I would say I wouldn't generalize it necessarily, but there
Yeah,
have
for
been
sure.
instances where I have been underestimated. And you
Yeah.
know what? I use that to my advantage. I use
Yeah, as
it
your like
to
motivation, right?
it's
Yeah.
motivation,
Yes, sir.
It's like, okay, all right. If you say I can't, I'm gonna say I can to
Yeah,
myself. I'm not gonna brag or but internally I say that,
yeah.
right?
And I like how you're keeping yourself very humble, right? It's like sometimes a lot of people who are very successful, especially within your field of architecture, they make,
Hmm.
oh, well, I make this so much money, this is so and so, and they're boasting about it, but you keep very humble and to yourself, and but on this, but once they really know you, they're like, wow, he's a great architect.
Yeah, I think it's again, it's really character. Character is everything, and I
For sure,
think that
character.
that you know goes across race or background lines, right?
Yeah,
It's about just trying to be the best version that you can of yourself,
yeah.
being authentic to yourself in terms of your interests, which clearly you guys are doing a great job doing that,
Thank you,
right?
thank you.
So yeah, just keep that up, and that's what I would just encourage any young person or anyone young in their career or even someone at my level to do is to continue to be their authentic self and
Yeah,
just show up in the world and just try to be the best version you can. Always
yeah,
keep on trying to improve. That's what I try and do every
sure.
every every day. I mean, Gavin will tell you he jumps in the car. I'm listening to an audiobook on
Yeah.
how to be a better leader. You know,
Wow.
um,
Always trying to improve every day. I like that.
always trying to improve every day. That's what I'm trying to do. So.
Yeah. Was that like the mindset that you came into, like coming to the US? Like, I got to be authentic. I have to be to myself and want to be the best person that I want to be every day.
I mean, over time, I've developed that. I didn't quite
Okay.
know, right? But
Yeah.
certainly coming to the US was part of my journey of becoming who I am in
Yeah.
terms of wanting to expand my perspectives beyond an experience beyond Jamaica.
Yeah.
So when I got to grad school, I used that opportunity to travel to different countries, to travel throughout Europe.
Wow.
Um, and learn other cultures as well. Whether be Italy or France or
Yeah.
Switzerland, wherever. Just to I've traveled to Africa. I've traveled to different parts of the U.S. I like to expand my horizon, and coming to the U.S. was part of that because
Yeah.
again, it helps. I think it helps you to understand different perspectives, work well with others, because that's you're gonna have to work with people from all walks of life, and
Yeah.
so that's what I endeavor to do, and it's helped me in my career for sure.
Yeah. Were there like kind of going to your education a little bit? Were there any like initial stigmas that you saw in minorities or Jamaicans specifically, or did they really come to you, or did they just happen out of nowhere?
Sorry, who if what
Oh,
happens?
did you have any like initial stigmas that you saw in minorities or yourself? Any experiences like that?
Um, hmm, stigmas. You mean, yeah, just what I will say is, there's definitely biases that you may have to overcome. I think even myself have had biases, right?
Yeah.
In terms of maybe even other people or other people that didn't look like me, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, they think this way or whatever. But when you get to know somebody authentically as a
Yeah.
person, I think all of that comes down. Those walls kind of come down,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter as much. But I think we all have biases, and I
For
think
sure.
the more conscious we are of those, the better we are able to interact with each other. And look,
Yeah.
STEM is I would say the STEM fields are fields of innovation, and
Yeah.
they're fields of collaboration. I mean, I work with on my project teams for any given project. I'm working with engineers. I'm working with 100 different people on one project
Yeah.
over several years to do one building, not alone the
Wow.
people building it, right? Now you're talking
Yeah.
about maybe several hundred more people that have to interpret what all decisions
You
that
build. Yeah,
you've done,
exactly.
you've made. So you know, the ability to interact with in a creative process and to innovate, which is
Yeah.
what's a large part of what STEM is,
Hmm.
in advancing the field, whether it's in chemistry or in math or in any other sciences or architecture or engineering. You're gonna have to work in teams,
Yeah.
and so I would say any kind of unconscious bias. It's always good to develop that. You know, read books, take training.
Yeah.
Expand your network, expand your friend circle.
Yeah.
Um, have lunch with people that don't necessarily look like you, right? And you get to know a different view of the world that can help you in your journey.
Wow. Do you think that you built, I know that your career is still long, is still like going on, right? Do you think that you've built a legacy that you've passed down to your children?
Well, as a parent, as any parent, that's one of the number one
Yeah, for sure.
goals and hopes is that
Yeah.
you leave a legacy. And um, I was very proud of Gavin, and really, happy to see that he's made such a great partner here in you with creating this podcast. And I think that is part of the what I hope to do. um Gavin or yourself or whoever is listening may not become an architect or even an engineer, but they may the reason they're probably listening is because they're interested in STEM. So I'm just
For
hoping
sure.
that um, through that and inspiring Gavin, who is my son, who can then inspire others. I know his brother Ben has shared that he's also interested in some version of STEM. Not sure exactly where.
Yeah.
But that's it's about finding your passion, finding what you love to do, and making sure you're called to do that, and pursuing it with passion and with integrity. And that's what I endeavor to do every day, and to be um, to set a good example. And that's what I try and do every day. And
It's
it's
been working so far
inspiring.
for sure.
It seems to be doing some
Yes, sir.
it's work. So I'm very that makes my heart smile. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's everything, right? Yeah. I would like to thank you for dedicating your time to us, being able to
Of
interview
course.
you of your experiences, because you truly are an aspiring individual. You know, you're probably someone I would like to learn about a little more if you were in a history book, anything like that. And I really appreciate giving your time and effort for these conversations because these, one day this could actually inspire somebody to go on out there and take risks like you did. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're very
Yeah.
welcome, and thanks for
Okay.
having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.